On May 7th, Amazon Web Services flipped a switch. AI agents running on AWS can now actually pay for things completely by themselves using stablecoins. This isn't theoretical anymore. It's live in production, running right through Coinbase and Stripe. Quote, "There will soon be more AI agents transacting than humans." That is straight from the Coinbase head of infrastructure, and that is the exact future they're building for right now. Hey, welcome back to czverse. I'm Maya.
And I'm Marcus. If you're new here, we break down the AI, agent, robotics, quantum, and crypto stories that actually matter. We don't dumb it down, and we definitely don't hype it up. We're just explaining the news exactly how we'd explain it to a friend.
And today, we are going really deep on a massive story, AWS Bedrock AgentCore Payments. It launched on May 7th, built in partnership with Coinbase and Stripe. And honestly, this is the very first managed payment system designed specifically for autonomous AI agents to transact using stablecoins.
Yeah, this sits right at the intersection of three of the most important trends we always cover. You've got AI agents, stablecoins, and that broader AI crypto convergence. In our opinion, this is absolutely one of the most consequential infrastructure announcements of 2026 so far.
There is a lot to unpack here, so let's just jump right in.
Section 1. The Agent Payment Revolution. Before May 7th, sure, AWS agents could reason, they could plan. But now they can actually transact, autonomously. Let's look at the raw numbers here. We are talking about settlement happening in roughly 200 milliseconds on Coinbase's base network. And the cost? It's literally less than a fraction of a single cent per transaction.
Wow.
Right? So an agent, like the ones Cox Automotive or Thomson Reuters are actively building right now, can make hundreds of micropayments every single second if it needs to.
Think about that. 200 milliseconds, a fraction of a cent. Compare that to traditional credit card rails. Those take literal seconds just to authorize. They charge baseline fees in the dollars, and they have minimum transaction limits that make true micropayments completely impossible.
Exactly. This financial rail mismatch has been a massive bottleneck for AI. Just imagine you have an agent that needs to call a paid API 10,000 times to scrape data for a report. If you tried that on traditional rails, those 10,000 transactions are just operationally impossible. The processing fees alone would totally eclipse the actual API costs. But on stablecoin rails, it's trivial.
Which brings us to Section 2, the X402 Protocol Explained.
So to really understand the engine running this, we actually have to go all the way back to the 1990s.
You've probably heard of HTTP 404, the not founder, right? Well, HTTP 402 is literally the payment required response code. When the original web specs were being drafted back in the 90s, engineers actually reserved this specific status code for the exact scenario where a server wanted to charge for digital content. The idea was super simple. The server returns a 402, the client provides payment, the server returns the content. But 402 was essentially just left sitting there, completely dormant for decades, because the financial rails of the 1990s simply couldn't support it.
Until right now.
Exactly. Until now, Coinbase launched X402 in May 2025 as the protocol that finally actually implements HTTP 402 the way it was originally meant to be used. The flow of X402 is incredibly elegant. Basically, an agent sends a request to a paid endpoint. That endpoint returns an HTTP 402, specifying its exact payment requirements. Then, the client wallet authenticates, executes the stablecoin payment, and simply resends the request, but this time with a cryptographic proof of payment attached. The server validates that proof, and boom, returns the content.
And the absolute beauty of this is that it's just HTTP. Literally every single web service in the entire world already speaks HTTP. So they just need to add handling for 402, and suddenly they're instantly payable by AI agents.
Hit the nail on the head. There is no clunky blockchain integration needed here. There's no custom proprietary payment gateway to build. It's just a web status code that's existed for 30 years, finally getting used exactly how it was intended. Right, and X402 is governed by the X402 Foundation, which keeps things open and neutral. But it is definitely not the only player in town. There's also this parallel protocol called Tempo's Machine Payments Protocol. It's also HTTP native, also designed for agents, but it's backed by Stripe. Same core idea, just a slightly different implementation. And then you have Google's Agent Payment Protocol, or AP2, sitting in that exact same category, with PayPal currently building on it.
So step back for a second. We've got X402 from Coinbase, the Machine Payments Protocol from Tempo, and AP2 from Google. 3 competing protocols, all of them HTTP native, all of them built explicitly for agent commerce.
The strategic implication of this is just massive. Over the next couple of years, this market is almost certainly going to consolidate down to 1 or 2 standards.
Either X402 wins out because of that incredible AWS and Coinbase distribution muscle, or AP2 takes it because of Google's massive enterprise reach. Or, honestly, the best-case scenario for developers is that they all just end up being entirely interoperable.
Moving on to Section 3. Why stablecoins won this round.
You might be wondering, why not just use traditional credit cards or regular fiat money? Honestly, it all comes down to the math.
First up is speed. Settlement on networks like Base or Solana happens in about 200 milliseconds. Traditional credit card authorization takes anywhere from 1 to 3 seconds, and it's not even truly final until the merchant batches those transactions at the end of the day. For agent commerce, where you're running thousands of transactions a minute, that speed difference is literally the difference between this works and this is impossible.
Okay, but then there's also the cost issue.
Oh, absolutely. This is huge. The per transaction cost on stablecoin rails is fractions of a cent. Meanwhile, credit card transactions hit you with a baseline cost of around 30 cents, plus a percentage, completely regardless of the transaction size. So a 1-cent micropayment on a credit card would cost you 30 cents just to process. But on stablecoin rails, that same 1-cent payment costs less than a cent.
And then we have programmability.
Yeah, this is the real game changer. Stablecoins are programmable money. You can literally write smart contracts that hold stablecoin balances, enforce specific conditions, automatically split payments, or even time-lock disbursements. Your standard virtual Visa card just can't do conditional payments like that. And traditional bank wires definitely cannot escrow funds on-chain.
So, stablecoins won this round purely because of their engineering fit, not because of some crypto ideology. But you might be asking why AWS, Coinbase, and Stripe chose USDC specifically instead of something like USDT.
Well, it really just comes down to enterprise trust, doesn't it?
Exactly. USDC is heavily favored in enterprise contexts because Circle, the company that issues it, is fully audited, fully reserved, US regulated, and provides crystal clear reporting. USDT is just a bit less transparent and has historically faced some regulatory friction. So for a massive Amazon Coinbase Stripe partnership that's trying to sell a Fortune 500 companies, USDC is just the vastly safer and more reliable choice.
All right, Section 4, real first use cases.
Let's get out of the architecture for a second and look at what these autonomous agents are actually out in the wild buying right now.
First up, paid APIs. AgentCore Payments enables instant, no account required, pay-per-call API access. An agent literally just shows up, makes a request, pays the tiny fee, and gets its response. The transaction itself is the entire relationship. Say goodbye to monthly subscriptions. They are completely dead in this model. Second, we're looking at MCP servers. AgentCore Payments lets agents pay for access to Model Context Protocol servers directly. So an agent can pay Masari a tiny fee for crypto market data, then immediately pay IGZA for a web search, all seamlessly within a single workflow, and all of it handled through instant micropayments. Third on the list is web content and paywalls. Warner Bros. Discovery is actually testing this out right now. They see huge potential for agent-driven transactions when it comes to premium content. So instead of a massive monthly subscription, you literally just pay for exactly what your personal agent watches or reads on your behalf. And fourth, agent-to-agent commerce.
Now, this is arguably the wildest concept of the whole bunch. We are talking about a true multi-agent economy. Just picture this. An orchestrator agent at one company autonomously hiring a bunch of specialized sub-agents at completely different companies to perform specific tasks.
It's wild. It essentially acts like a fund manager, autonomously allocating capital across an entire network of AI labor. So a consulting agent owned by company A could hire a research agent owned by company B. It pays that agent per task using stablecoins and then receives the finished research. Heuris AI is actually one of the early adopters, building out this exact kind of cross-agent labor market. We were talking about genuinely new economic territory here.
Section 5. Solving the identity problem.
Okay, so the obvious question any enterprise is going to ask is, how do you prevent an AI software agent from just going rogue and completely draining your bank account? Well, AWS built this really clever 3-layered security vault.
Layer 1 is the wallet ownership boundary. This contains the absolute worst-case scenario. Basically, a compromised agent can only ever drain its own specific isolated wallet. It is cryptographically blocked from ever accessing any other user's wallet. Then, Layer 2 is hard runtime spending limits.
Right. So even within its own isolated wallet, there are per session and per time period spending caps that are hard-coded right at the runtime level. If you set the budget to $10 per session, it absolutely doesn't matter what the agent is convinced to do. That financial circuit breaker is going to trip the second it hits $10.
And finally, Layer 3 is cryptographic identity binding,
which ties perfectly back to the ERC 8004 standard. Essentially, every single agent gets a unique cryptographic identity.
So every payment it makes, every API call, every tool invocation, it is all logged permanently against that specific identity. This leaves an absolutely perfect, unalterable audit trail.
But we still have to worry about those crypto-native exploits. What happens if an agent gets hit with a prompt injection and gets tricked into spending money maliciously? Well, AWS actively protects these payment rails using a really robust defense-in-depth architecture known as Model Armor. It actively detects things like prompt injection and tool poisoning before the malicious prompt can even get close to the transaction layer.
Exactly. You have a prevention layer, a containment layer, and a forensic layer, all of them working together to map perfectly onto the kind of well-understood risk practices that big enterprises actually require.
Section 6. What could still go wrong? Because, look, we have to be totally grounded and realistic here. Things in this incredibly nascent economy are absolutely going to break. First big risk, regulatory fragmentation. The US, Europe, Singapore, they all have completely different legal frameworks. So an agent operating across borders has to somehow navigate multiple conflicting regulatory regimes all at the exact same time. Second is settlement layer concentration. Right now, AgentCore Payments settles primarily on Base and Solana. And, well, both of those have had historical outages. If the underlying network halts, this entire agent economy running on those specific rails just grinds to a halt with it. Third is stablecoin issuer risk. Yes, USDC is fully reserved, but if Circle were to experience some massive regulatory event, literally anyone holding USDC for their agent operations would be completely exposed. Fourth, and this is probably the most complex, is agent goal hacking. This is definitely the hardest risk to mitigate. An agent might be persuaded, through some really clever prompt manipulation, to spend money on services that its human owner never actually intended. Technically, the transaction is perfectly valid, but the underlying intent has been completely corrupted. And finally, there is zero chargeback recourse. The sheer speed and finality of crypto cuts both ways. If your agent gets scammed out in the wild, there is no customer service hotline or credit card company you can call to reverse the charge. It's just gone. So, looking at the near-term timeline for all this, AgentCore Payments is currently sitting in preview mode. We're mapping out general availability to hit sometime around Q2 or Q3 of 2026. After that, broad enterprise adoption will most likely follow in late 2026 once trust builds up and enterprise risk officers actually get comfortable with this new architecture.
Which makes 2027 the truly critical year for protocol convergence. If we see X402, AP2, and the machine payments protocol unify, we are going to get one massive, interoperable, global agent economy.
The machine economy officially stopped being theoretical on May 7th. AI agents transacting autonomously in stablecoins is now a fully deployed product operating at hyperscale. So, out of all the use cases we just covered, what are you most excited about? Is it paid APIs finally becoming pay-per-call? Is it the crazy potential of agent-to-agent commerce? Or honestly, are you most worried about the very real risks of goal hacking? Tell us in the comments. We genuinely read every single one.
And we do daily AI, robotics, quantum, and crypto news breakdowns right here on the channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything.
This has been czverse. We'll see you in the next one.